You're now watching the Danny Mac Podcast on the Bet Rivers Network.
Welcome into the Danny Mac Podcast. I'm Dan McNeil, and I'm glad you're with me today as the Bears drop their 9th consecutive game. They lose to the Lions 34-17 at Soldier Field. Jared Goff and Gibbs had their way with the Bears defense. That's where you point the finger. Today, if you're into breaking down these individual setbacks along the way, and I suppose that's the purpose of a post-game show, I'm obligated to do that. You look at what disappoints you the most, what the positives were. There's way more negatives than positives in this thing. For Christ's sakes, the Bears gave up points on their first 5 possessions defensively. First 5 series of the game, Detroit scores. If it's not a field goal, it's a touchdown. And then on their 6th possession, they missed a field goal. By the way, is there anything cooler than a missed 65-yard field goal, especially when it has the distance? I loved it. Goff, very effective, 23 out of 32, 336 and 3. And he was not intercepted. He was not sacked. Montez Sweat, your table again, is not ready. Caleb Williams had a good day for the Bears numbers-wise, 26 out of 40 for 334 and a couple of touchdowns. And he again wasn't intercepted. He's only thrown 5 on the year, which is crazy good, especially considering that offensive line, and he was sacked twice today. The Bears losing Tevin Jenkins, who wasn't ready to go, and he was limping through the pregame walkthrough. And Braxton Jones leaves early. Good news. He waves to everybody on his way out the door on the cart. Everybody ecstatic. He's going to be okay. Yeah, their defense sucks. Their defense is absolutely dreadful. Thought this coming into the season that their defense was overloved for the second half of last year, and certainly that's been proven to be the case this year, especially since the loss of Andrew Billings, the overweight defensive tackle with that chest injury that sidelined him, knocked him out for the year. That's been a huge blow. Gervon Dexter wasn't able to go today. It was just, it was an overmatch is what it was. You had an overmatched Bears defense, a Detroit offense that absolutely deserves. Man, they deserve that number 1 seed, don't they? 13-2. Are you with me? Are you rooting for the Lions? How can you not? This is a team that had won 1 playoff game prior to this past January since the Eisenhower administration. That was in January of 92 when they beat the Cowboys. Then last year they beat the Rams and the Buccaneers, both games at Ford Field before losing to the 49ers in the NFC Championship game. How can you not be rooting for the Lions, especially given the injuries they are now having to overcome? Sorry about the verb split, Paul Mulaney. But, yeah, the loss of today, it didn't hurt them. David Montgomery out. Gibbs was terrific, 23 carries for 109 yards and a touchdown, and that was a long run of 12. So they committed to it. They pounded him today, and he made them glad they did. He was terrific today in the absence of Monty. Amir McNeil, the big defensive tackle, number 54, out. Didn't hurt him today. The Bears couldn't run the ball. Their longest run of the day, 13 yards, was Caleb Williams's. He was their leading rusher with 34 yards. DeAndre Swift, 9 carries, 20 yards. I heard on the post-game show today, I listened to a few of the post-game shows, flipping around a little bit. I wanted to catch a little bit of the flagship, Thayer and Joniak, and Jeff Joniak pointing out, hey, the Bears outscored them 17-14 after spotting the Lions a 20-0 lead. Yeah, tell Thomas Brown that. That'll pick him up. That'll be good. But Tom Thayer, I'm sorry, it wasn't Thayer. It was on another outlet. It was on The Score where I heard Mike Mulligan, who was hosting with Olin Kreutz and Pat Manley. Mulligan suggesting the Bears have not done much to get DJ Moore involved in the offense. Are you kidding me? Really? Is that your take on this? Maybe I'm watching something different. He was targeted 10 times today. DJ Moore gets a carry or 2 every game, and he had 1 today. It only went for a couple of yards, but he caught 7 passes for 68 yards. I think Caleb Williams has looked consistently in the direction of DJ Moore, and the numbers bear that out. I think if anything, you're going to say, where has Cole Kmet been? And he had a touchdown catch today, one of the 2 touchdown passes Caleb threw, but only was targeted twice, and he caught them both for 9 yards and a touchdown. He's been the forgotten man. And secondly would be Rome Odunze, the number 9 pick in the draft, who was targeted 7 times today, caught 4 of them for 77 yards, and he also had the costly fumble early in the game. I would say you're not getting him opportunities way more than DJ Moore, but that was one of the takes. Keenan Allen had the big game today, and he's had probably, I would say, most consistent year of all the Bears wide receivers. Targeted 13 times today, caught 9 of them for 141 yards and a touchdown with a long of 46. So a nice game for Keenan Allen, the touchdown that narrows the gap to 27-13 at the half. But when you're giving up points on almost every possession, it's tough to be encouraged when you hit the break trailing by 2 touchdowns, even with the Bears being a second half team under Williams this year. Something Thayer said on post game today, as I jump around here a little bit, that I thought I don't agree with. And maybe it was right after the game and being in a room full of people at Hunley's Sports Bar in Cedar Lake, Indiana. And thanks to everyone who turned out, especially those who bought my book. There wasn't much of a feeling of consolation. Bears fans are really wanting this thing to be over with as quickly as possible. And maybe even media who have been grinding it out too, looking forward to the refractory period when they can put games away and focus on the coaching search. Maybe they're looking forward to the thing being a wrap too, because I heard things like, it's not been a terrible year. You know, Keenan Allen on the postgame show with Jason McKee, the sideline reporter for ESPN 1000's Bears flagship coverage, seemed like he was in a good mood. It almost seemed like Dilly Bar's time. We lost the game, but let's go to DQ. We've all earned the butterscotch flavored Dilly, or cherry if you like, or even the standard chocolate. They're all good. I get one of each when I go. You know, there's no prize for being close. Pat Manley was pretty much all over this on the score. Got their asses kicked. They got their asses kicked. They didn't run the ball well. They didn't stop the run. They didn't pressure the passer. They got, you know, you don't get takeaways. Man, how can you be that excited about it? 1 sack on the day. Zach Pickens. 1 frickin' sack on the day. Montez Sweat had 2 solos, however. Got to do the sweatometer each and every week. I want to remind those of you who like to wager on college and pro football, there is something we have at Bet Rivers called the Same Game Parlay that's really cool. If you hit 2 or more in the same game on a Same Game Parlay, you earn squares that are worth bonus bets, profit boosts, and jackpots of up to $10,000. It's the Same Game Parlay from Bet Rivers. And I don't mean to be boastful because I lose more than I win, but mine was a successful one today. It only paid 2-1, but hell, if you doubled your money on the stock market in one day, you feel pretty good about yourself. Yeah, plus 200 was the move on the Lions on the money line. And Amon-Ra St. Brown touchdown at any point, and the over on rushing yards for the second-year man out of Alabama, Jahmyr Gibbs. So I had those 3. It was plus 200. So good for me. Do the Same Game Parlay and do it at Bet Rivers. The boss at Bet Rivers is Adam Delavitt. I call him Baby Capone. I've called him that for years because he walks softly, he talks softly, but he carries a big stick. Deli, you in a bad mood today? No, I'm in a great mood. I may fire an intern. He's the man, and he has given me the green light to be selfish for just a couple of minutes here, and I want to do that. He asked me, he says, feel free to talk a little bit more about I Bear Witness. So I want to do that for just a second. It's getting very late to get this done by Christmas, but let me give you just a couple of minutes on why I think if you're a Bears fan, you will love the book I just had published by Eckhart's Press called I Bear Witness. It's about my 40 years of experiences covering the Bears, beginning in 85 when I was an intern at WGN, which just had acquired the Bears rights, And that magical 15-1 season capped by an easy win over the Patriots in Super Bowl 20. It is that season on up until the end of September this year. I take you to where the Bears were 2-2 and waiting for the Carolina Panthers, waiting for the genie, David Tepper, to roll into town to give the Bears their third win of the year, and work their way closer to that high second-round pick he's given them. But it's what I've experienced as a Bears insider. It's a lot of celebration of goodness. The 85 team absolutely still deserves each and every bouquet that's thrown at its feet. And why that team didn't win more than Super Bowl 20 has been debated for many years. And I unlocked some things in there that may give them a little bit more of a reason to exhale and say it wasn't all on us. Been a lot of fingers pointed and more of them. And there's some people still pissed off at Ditka. And you'll read the quotes from Richard Dent and Otis Wilson and others. Don't hold it upside down. And I bear witness. Eckhart's Press is ECKHARTZ. Eckhart'sPress.com. I went and visited Steve McNeil last week. He slept most of the 2.5 hours I was there. I enjoyed the company of Keith Van Horn, the former Bears right tackle, and former Bears defensive tackle Jim Osborne, who I'd never met and was a huge fan of when I was in high school and in the early 80s. It was good to see both of those guys. But Misty McNeil, Steve's wife, showed me the difference in the Super Bowl ring, the 85 ring, versus the Hall of Fame ring. And the Hall of Fame ring weighs about twice as much, and it is close to twice the size. And in my book, I explain how the Bears got screwed on their Super Bowl rings, how Michael McCaskey cheated them, and they wound up getting a lesser ring than the original one they picked out. Details are in I Bear Witness. Why was Walter Payton so chronically unhappy? The details are in I Bear Witness, and he was my hero when I was a high school athlete. Coach Dan Miller got tired of me chirping about Walter Payton. Payton, did you see my guy yesterday? Did you see what he did against the Vikings? 40 carries, 275. And Dan said, Coach Miller says, you think you're going to be Walter Payton? No, I'm not delusional. I'm fearless like he is, but I'm not delusional. I want to be Roland Harper. I just want to be the man next to the man. And then in 1993, when we thought we were doing radio shows in the early days of The Score to nobody, Peyton had been listening, and he called my show to talk about the Bulls and give his 2 cents on why Jordan had not been performing well and how people needed to back off MJ just a little bit. It was one of my first pinch me moments. I got to know Walter a little bit, got to know McNeil and Van Horn and Hilgenberg and Thayer and McMahon and Urlacher and Miller. It's the guys I got to know. It's a column. It's a radio show. It is historical. If you're a Packers fan, and I know I have a lot of listeners in Northern Illinois and Southern Wisconsin, there's an entire chapter on why the Packers have owned the Bears in the last 32, 33 years. It's more than Favre, Rodgers, and Love. I promise you. It's organizational. The chapter Dairyland Drought illuminates that. I promise you. For $25, you're going to love I Bear Witness. I trust a lot of you who listen to my shows and watch these shows are Bears fans. I did this in Chicago for 30 plus years, almost 40 years, just not contiguously. And you know what? I've seen it all, and I share it all with you. And some of it will make you cry, and some of it will make you glad you were a Bears fan years ago. Eckhart's Press is ECKHARTZ Press.com. And if you hit the / I Bear Witness, you'll find it. It's very easily navigable. Even I can do it. Even I can figure it out. So for the Bears fan in your life who loves this team, I know it's not a great time right now with them having lost 9 in a row, but I promise you, I Bear Witness will be a thing they will enjoy. Might take them a few weeks until after the season is over before they want to open it up. But check it out, I Bear Witness. And if you want to just visit my Twitter page, Danny Mac Show, the pinned tweet has the order information. You just click on the link, and it's very easy to do, even for those of us who are baby boomers and struggle with this sort of thing. I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, whatever it is you're celebrating. It certainly isn't a Bears victory as they lost their 9th straight. and headed toward another probable, I would suggest, 4-13 season. The Seahawks coming in Thursday night, followed by the final date against the Packers, who will be looking for their 12th straight win in the series. So we get through this, and then we can start to focus on what the Bears are going to do with a head coach. And my hope is they have to wait, and they're patient enough and willing enough to pay enough to get Ben Johnson. If you've heard the podcast in the last couple of weeks, you know that's what I've been rooting for. And I think when you consider the money they pay free agents who aren't expected to be around for very long and make huge money for 1 year and barely bust a grape, why wouldn't you want to pay a coach who's going to be your guy $15 million a year? It's what you paid for Yannick Ngakoue last year. $15 million for 4 sacks. Jared Allen cost him $15 million 10 years ago when the great Phil Emery was pulling the strings. These are things you learn in my book. So the Seahawks Thursday, and then they wrap it up against the Packers, and then we start to look for head coaches and find out what the fate is of general manager Ryan Poles. It is not a certainty he will be retained. In fact, if the Bears get the head coach they most want, and that head coach says, I got a guy in mind to pick the groceries, and it ain't Ryan Poles, maybe he won't be back. I tend to think he should be back. I don't think... See, the decision to keep Eberflus on board wasn't his. That was Kevin Warren's decision. Warren didn't want to talk to Harbaugh. So I ain't throwing that on the GM that they went to work with a shitty coach this year. Not on him, despite his public stance on how much he backed Matt Eberflus. They were frickin' frack for how many months? Every time they sat next to each other at news conferences. Buddies for life, I think. BFFs. That was a facade initially. He drank the Kool-Aid, did Poles. He wanted to believe Eberflus was the man because it was an arranged marriage. So, of course, he got behind him. And he did suggest to Poles last offseason, through an insider, longtime Bears employee, hears from Harbaugh. He says to Poles, Jim Harbaugh wants to talk to you. Poles says that to Warren. Warren says, pass. Not interested. We won't talk to Jim Harbaugh. That's not on the GM. The GM did a shitty job with the O-line, and he overvalued Montez Sweat. They didn't trade too much for him. They paid too much for him. Second-round pick I live with for a front-end pass rusher, but he's not. He's not a top-tier guy. He's a number 2. And I thought that when he was in Washington, that he was a good supporting player, and I'm wound up being proven right again. But Ryan Poles should be brought back. It's not on him. They went to work with a head coach who was ill-qualified this year. That's not his fault. But if the new guy says, I got my own guy, and that guy is Ben Johnson, who's asking for the job and wanting the job, if Poles gets whacked, whack away, my friends. Adam Delavitt, thank you for your generosity and your leadership here at the Bet Rivers Podcast Network. My executive producer is the KC Wolf of Northwest Indiana, the one and only Sam Michael. And I also want to thank Randy Merkin, who gets me all of our A-list guests for this show. Man, we have hit some real big home runs in recent weeks. Most recently, Steve Young, the Hall of Famer. That was a fun interview. If you want to catch one I've done in the last couple months that you haven't seen or heard yet, find the Steve Young interview. It only ran about 22 minutes. I think you'll like it. Alex Pastor does a great job. So does Troy Mocker. Have a great Christmas. I'll be back in a couple of days with plenty more on the Bears as they continue to play out the string in this awful 4-13 and pending season. I'm Danny Mack.